Recording in progress.
Hi, Aliya. Nice to virtually meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me, Heidi.
Of course, I'm happy to host you. I want to start with a bit of an introduction. This is how I normally start my interviews. I know you're a citizen of the world. You're an artist. You're an actor. You're a comedian. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been, doing comedy for some years, kind of got into it by accident. Citizen of the world since I was born. I've been, moving around a lot growing up, which was sort of how I got into this bit of a nomadic rhythm that I have now. So in my 20s, I got into work in the tourism industry. I wanted to travel and see the world. I didn't really have the means to do it, to be honest with you. I was on my own since I was young, and I was like, well, how do I do this? And then I found a job as a flight attendant. And so I did that for a long time, over a decade, and loved it. Loved working as a flight attendant. Still, it was so hard to leave. To be honest with you, it was such a wonderful job. I love people, and I would spend my days on my planes making people laugh, and never thought twice. People would always my whole life tell me I was funny. It's something that I just did, I think a lot of it was just moving around so much. It
Right.
was a great way to meet people and make sure, it was a really good way to handle bullies and, go to a new school and like, diffuse situations and, any tensions that came across our way growing up. I always used humor for that. And then I accidentally became a comedian. Um,
Yeah.
I was, it was a strange time in my life where I had to stop traveling for a little while.
Mm,
I had some like a person very close to me that was very ill, and
mm.
so I stopped traveling so that I could stay local and be there as a support. And I started to get so stir crazy because I was used to traveling so much, and I was like, I need a hobby. So I signed up for Groupon. I started doing yoga classes and like those paint and wine classes and all these things that they have on Groupon. And one day there was a comedy writing class
Nice.
that came through, and I was like, oh, this looks like it could be fun. And the rest is history. People are like, how do you mean you became a comedian by accident? I'm like, well, I was purposely funny my whole life, but I accidentally found the career option. Um, and then the rest kind of came with it too, like once you become a performing artist, then you start becoming, more involved in other areas, acting and writing as well.
Mm.
And then, as you know, I was able to get a great role in an incredible film, and now I'm,
Yes.
not sure which, I'm sort of getting pulled in a couple directions, but I really love it all. So, yeah.
Amazing. So that awesome film is Scarborough. For those who have not seen it, I'll always give it a shout out when I can.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an incredible
Uh,
film.
for
Yeah.
sure. I want to ask you a little bit about, you know, using your vulnerability while also trying to be funny on stage.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. No, that's a great subject. I think that it's such a beautiful thing to marry together, because, I mean, comedy and humor can be used for all kinds of silly things, and those have their merit and their space in comedy. But they can also be used for things like disarming folks, diffusing situations, releasing tension, catharsis, right?
Mhm.
Both for myself and the audience.
Right.
And that's something that, I recently got asked to write a piece about how comedy helped my mental health.
Hmm.
And that's something I really delved into because I think that vulnerability was something that was always very difficult for me.
Right.
Because I moved around a lot growing up, I think that there was always just a very surface level of how close I became with people.
Yes.
And so tapping into actual vulnerability and going to those places I found difficult. I found very difficult. When I first started doing comedy, I was very like, I didn't want to talk about my race. I didn't want to talk about gender. I didn't want to be pigeonholed by these things. I was like, what? I could just talk about cheese like everybody else. And then I realized that there was actually magic to talking about my personal experiences,
Hmm.
um, both because they became more interesting
Right.
instantly,
Hmm.
and because they connected with folks on a different level.
Okay.
And the more that I kind of started going there, the more I started really feeling like I was connecting with my audiences on a more profound level. and that the laughter that I was giving them wasn't just a laughter that they had in the moment, but it was a laughter that they would carry with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that became really beautiful. This show that I'm doing at the Toronto Fringe Festival, is a show that I have poured so much vulnerability into, so much of my honest truth, so much love, so much, of my own story, which it took me a long time to be comfortable telling it on stage. But because I started comedy so much later, I really knew who I was. So it was a matter of me putting those walls down and allowing myself to tap into that vulnerability that
Mm-hmm.
really, I think, took a bit of time. But the I could see the payoff right away every time I would do it. People would come up to me after shows, and I didn't have to be the funniest person on the lineup, but they
Mm-hmm.
wanted to come talk to me and tell
Nice.
me how much they liked what I was saying, how much it resonated with them, how much it meant to them to see somebody like me on stage. Um, and yeah, it quickly became something that I realized was, really my secret weapon. And everybody's got theirs. Everybody's got their gift, and
Mm-hmm.
mine was being able to express vulnerability through comedy. So yeah.
Thank you. That's really interesting. So you bring up your one person extraordinaire show. Tell me what's the name of the show? What is what are some of the, I guess, key things in consideration when you decide what to share with us?
Sure, yeah. So my show, it's called Where You From? And it's I'm glad. I love it when people giggle at the title because they get it. And I'm like, you get it, okay.
Yeah.
Um, it's my solo show that I began with very little knowledge of how a solo show is supposed to go, to be honest. Um, but I had kind of taken that on because I had faced a lot of um sort of, I'm going to say, judgment in the industry that I wasn't enjoying, where people were telling me what my story was. And it was really more than an annoyance. It was hurtful because I felt like I was constantly being pigeonholed. And it started to shake my faith in people. And I've always been somebody who really believes in people. And I don't think I don't think it's optimism. I think it's my experiences in life. I've met so many people. I say this all the time. I've met so many people because of my circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, and I think deep down inside, we all just want to connect. We all want to feel loved. We all want these, and then there's so much fear in the world. There's so much division in the world. And then we start going to these places where, we see each other as different, when we're all the same. But now we start having all these labels. And when I started getting pigeonholed and labeled because of the skin I'm in, because of my gender, because of my sexual preferences, and I was like, well, but that is not my person. That is not my heart. That is not my experience. And so in that moment, I kind of decided, I said, I don't want to have to continue fighting the system. I don't want to be asking for approval of what I can and cannot showcase. So when I learned about these festivals where I could put together my own show and take it around, I said, well, that's how I'm going to learn to be an artist because I'm
Mm.
still finding my voice. And
Right.
I don't want to be influenced by all these folks that are telling me, like, oh, yeah, we'll pay you. But also, could you tell us a bit more about your cultural experience? I know what you're doing, you know? And so I wrote this show, and I didn't even realize what I was doing when I started writing this show, because I started writing this show to talk about my identity and
Mm.
my struggle with belonging and identity. Um, and then something happened. I started doing this and I realized how universal that was, because we've all felt this struggle of belonging and identity. And maybe it's not based on the skin we're in. Maybe it's because of our gender. Maybe it's because of our age. Maybe it's because of our personality or the way that we like to eat our soup. Whatever it is, we've all felt like we don't belong in some ways. We've all felt like people are misplacing or misjudging us. We've all felt like our identities are not being recognized, or that we're struggling to express who we are, and so all of these things, that those universal experiences, all of a sudden it became very clear that I was onto something that was more than just a comedy show and more than my expression of self.
Mm.
And so that's where I kind of became more and more motivated to start talking about these subjects and these themes of identity and belonging and really togetherness.
Right.
It's cheesy, but I like it. It feels good. Why not? Right?
Why
So
not?
it's a comedy show, it's a feel good show, and something I'm very proud of. I think that the impact that it has on audiences is really profound, and it makes me so proud to share it with people, truly. Yeah.
Nice. I love
Yeah.
hearing that. I know that your show sold out in Melbourne. Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of those reactions that you've already just alluded to
Sure.
in terms of that connection with audiences that are from other places?
Yeah. So I've taken this show to a few festivals in Australia. I've done it in Perth, Melbourne, and Sydney at the festivals out there, and it's sold out everywhere I've gone. And usually, what happens is it sells out because people tell their friends and their family,
Mm,
because people actually really feel that connected to this show and
mm,
to the moment that we share. They actually want to become ambassadors for it, and that's really like the most heartwarming thing is that when people show up the second time and now they brought their whole family, and I'm like, what? Or somebody comes up to me and they're like, my friend so and so told me to come check out your show, she said I would love it, and I did.
nice.
And those are the moments where it's like, whoa, okay. And so I've always heavily relied on word of mouth marketing.
Mm,
I come in, and my show title, my poster, it's all good. It's all good marketing, but I don't do a heavy load of marketing, but it attracts enough people that once those folks see it, they tell other people. And then by the end of the festival, usually, that's what happens is the show ends up doing well, and yeah, it really, I've had folks that message me, after the show, sometimes months after, sometimes years after, they'll comment on a post of mine, because there's been a couple of years from when I started to then
mm,
COVID happened, so I'm
right.
restarting this now, and people are like, I still think about that show and how much it meant to me, I had, and it's cool because like it's not just, when I wrote this show, I wanted to make sure that anybody who identified with me, so if they were people of color or women, that they would feel proud,
Mhm,
because that's one thing I always felt like a lot of times growing up, and things are different now, but growing up when I was watching comedy, anytime the rare times that you would see a person of color or a woman on stage, oftentimes they'd be making fun of themselves and giving into the stereotypes. Now, not
mm,
to judge them, because perhaps that's what they had to do to be able to get the stage
right.
time or
Mhm,
the recognition, because the industry was only accepting those certain voices.
mhm,
So, no judgment on them, but it would always make me feel bad. And so I was
mhm,
like, you know what? When I get on stage, I'm not going to do that. And when I get off stage, I'm going to make sure that anybody who feels represented by me is going to feel proud of themselves. And that's what started to happen, But not only that, but other folks, I remember there was this like, middle-aged white man who was married with a daughter who messaged me after the show, and he wrote to me, and I still have the message. He said, Aliya, I still can't stop thinking about your show. I only hope that my daughter has that little girl confidence for the rest of her life, like you talked about.
oh,
And
nice.
I was like, he's gonna see that in her now
Mhm,
and encourage that in her now. And he's gonna understand what the world does to little girls.
mhm,
He may not have seen it from his perspective, because we can't all see each other's perspective all the time. We're limited. But because
right.
I shared my story,
Mhm,
now he can see and foretell what could happen with his daughter,
mhm.
and I just thought that was really cool. I just think that's really a very special
I think
connection.
so. And I guess it's also this sort of nice balance of funny with poignant
Hmm.
because it's also somebody's maybe different point of view,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
And when it comes down to it, it's honesty, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can't beat honesty. I can come here and tell you a bunch of jokes that have crazy stories and all kinds of twists and turns and make you laugh, certainly. But that honesty factor is what really sits in a person, that resonates.
Right. And I guess it's also that connection you create with your audience as well.
Yeah.
I'm curious how your style has shifted or evolved from your initial sketches to what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, as I said, when I first started, I really wanted to stay away from the things that I thought would pigeonhole me. I would write jokes that I thought were funny and that they were my perspective and my personality, but I'd be very avoidant of wanting to fall into the trap of talking about race and gender. I
Mm.
saw it as a trap because I thought if I talk about those things, then they're gonna be like, oh, here's the girl with her race stuff again. But then I realized I didn't have to talk about it in the narrative that I'd seen.
Hmm.
And that if I did talk about it, it was up to me if I wanted to talk about my race and how I wanted to express it.
Right.
And so then I started. And what I started to do was instead of talking about how they see me, I would talk about how I see them, how I see them seeing me,
Mm.
you know?
Okay. Yeah.
And there in that shift, I felt like I took power in being able to talk about my otherness.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, does your show, like your current show, where you from, does it ever involve any audience interaction? Like in terms of, or where you might ask somebody for some input or anything like that?
Yeah, it used to involve more audience interaction,
Mhm.
but I have been building this show to take it to Edinburgh.
Ah,
And I've been told that in Edinburgh, audience interaction is not favored. So I've been actually taking out the audience interaction, to be honest with you. But I did like it for my
okay.
own sake of like the fun
Right.
and like keeping the audience on their edge a little.
Mm.
Yeah, like on their edge, on the edge of their seat. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
On the edge, on the edge. Anyway, so
We got it.
I did like that a little, you know. And I'd always tell women, I'm like, don't worry, I only pick on the men, you know. And it was true. It was true. But you know, I think that for the sake of this show being like tighter and like more like packaged
Yes.
as a show, I think it is better that I did take out the audience interaction.
Mhm. I'm also aware that it's, the Fringe usually has a very tight time line,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
you start and you end at a
Yeah.
particular time, and
Exactly.
mm.
But I'll tell you, listen, Heidi, I'll tell you a secret, okay? So when I first started this show, the first festival I took it to, I was very new to comedy. I
Mm.
did not have enough time to fill. I had a 50-minute slot. I had a 7-minute opener act come through, and I had 43 minutes to fill, and I had maybe 30 minutes at best.
Mm.
So what I did was I built in a lot of audience interaction and relied on my ability to do improv.
Right.
And so I would get the audience to ask me questions throughout the show, and they could ask me anything that they wanted except for where I was from. And so then I would answer their questions and I would tell them stories. And I'm a good storyteller and I'm good at improvising and funny on my feet, you know, and you don't have to have punchline, punchline, punchline. When you're answering things in the moment, people are a lot more accepting and forgiving. They'll be happy if you have one funny thing in a minute
Right.
rather than, you know.
Hmm.
So the pressure was a little bit off because of that, and that's how I actually built the show. Is I
Ah.
would start telling stories, and then people often ask the same questions, so I would repeat those stories and be able
Mm.
to find ways of making them tighter and punchier. And they were all real stories. Like people would ask me, like, "What's the craziest thing that ever happened to you on your traveling?"
Right.
Or you know, what was one of the coolest things that ever happened to you at a show, or like, you know, sort of things like that, or like, what's a funny memory from your childhood? And
Hmm.
so those are the stories that I would tell. I got a lot of questions about how I do my hair.
Of
But yeah,
course.
so people would ask questions, and and so that was there was a huge amount of audience interaction at the beginning, and a lot of improv at the beginning, as I, you know, developed the show.
Right. And I think it's nice to hear because I think sometimes audiences don't realize the work that goes behind
Right.
having, a
Yeah.
Fringe show, if you
Yeah.
will.
or the risks that we take as artists.
True, for sure.
Yeah.
I understand that this show is part of the Fringes Funny program as
Yeah, the
well.
collective.
The
Yeah.
collective. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, to be honest with you, I can't say that I have much to say except for like to show total gratitude to the folks that put it together.
Mhm.
Alia was a big proponent in putting together the Fringes Funny Collective, and I think everybody came together very quickly. There was a few folks, Victoria, and a bunch of folks that were also doing comedy shows that once, and I don't know who was at the helm of the idea. As I said, I know Alia had a lot to do with it, and
Mhm.
other folks as well came together and said, hey, listen, we can band together and make comedy like a big deal in the festival and share our audiences, because folks who want to come out for funny will want to come out for more funny. What a lovely idea,
Right.
and that's really like, I think that shows so much in terms of the way that we've changed, and we are changing as a society. I hope, this is happening more and more, where we're realizing we don't even have to compete with each other. We can create more space for each other,
Mhm.
and that there's enough space for us all. Like, for example, if we get more comedy fans out, that's more comedy fans for everyone,
Right.
right? So
Mhm.
it's a beautiful thing to think that that is the direction that we're taking, and that's certainly the direction that they took with this Fringes Funny Collective, to say that, hey, we can all support each other and help each other, and yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
just want to give the full name. That's Aliya Rasul of
Ali
Tita
Rasul,
Collective
yeah.
and Victoria Laverge of Sex T-Rex, I think.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, lovely people. I'm kind of just wondering to wrap up a little bit. Aside from the Fringe, I know you're gonna take this show on the road. Where else can we find your work? Are you doing any stand up in the city?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my God, I do stand up in the city all the time. Every night I'm here, except for right now with this tooth surgery. But otherwise, all weekend I'll be doing gigs. Uh, through There's a great place that I will highly recommend for comedy lovers, called the Comedy Lab. It is the first minority run club in Toronto, and
Oh,
a
yes.
wonderful place. Always great lineups. And the person who runs it, Danton Lamar, what a solid human. And there's also like just all kinds of great comedy happening in the city all the time. I really recommend it. I think that it's such a beautiful thing to be gathered in a room full of people laughing. I know that we can watch Netflix at home, or we can see all the greats do their specials, and that's wonderful as well. I'm not going to knock that, but there's something special about live comedy and being able to laugh
Mm.
together and share that energy and share that moment, and share those vibrations. That's really, really special. And yeah, I usually try to post shows that I'm on. If you followed me on my socials, it's all Aliya Comedy, spelt with a K. So because of my last name, so it's
Yes,
ALIYAKOMEDY.
I'll be sure to
That's
link that.
And those are my socials all over the place, and I post about my shows, and look through my website to see where I'm touring, and certainly I'll be showing my face in some more TV and movie stuff as well, inshallah. So we'll be we keeping busy. We're keeping
Good.
busy, yeah.
Happy to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you for
Hopefully,
this
we
lovely
will see
conversation, Heidi.
audiences your way.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the support, and it's really lovely to meet you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.